So it looks to me like we've got a pretty full house. Of course, other people are very welcome to trickle in. This is being recorded. So if you do miss anything, want to revisit this great talk, you'll be able to do that on the Peel's YouTube channel and also find a link through our website. And I believe we'll be sending that out to all attendees this evening as well. As you see, this program is being interpreted in ASL, and you can also turn on the captions if you like in your own Zoom window. So just to kind of get started officially here, I want to say hello and welcome everybody to the Peel Online. Tonight, I have the great pleasure of welcoming you all to this talk by Lee Boot about his exhibition, Abstracts and Artifacts, which is on at the Peel in downtown Baltimore through February 12th. My name is Nancy Proctor, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at the Peel, and I was its refounding executive director when we began renovations to save the historic Peel Museum building in 2017. The Peel's mission today is about amplifying and sharing the voices and the stories that too often have been overlooked or intentionally erased from the historical record. So before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that the Peel in Baltimore stands on the traditional ancestral and unceded lands of the Piscataway, the Lenape, and the Susquehannock indigenous peoples. In this age of virtual events, we encourage everyone to spare a moment to acknowledge the original stewards of the land you are joining us from tonight. I'd also like to thank and recognize Ryan Coons, Peter Dayton, and Ashley Minner of the Lumbee tribe, as well as the Historic New Orleans Collection Education Department for their land acknowledgements, which have inspired and informed my own appreciation of those whose homelands I occupy today, and also the Peel's work to amplify Indigenous voices and histories. As you may know, when Rembrandt Peale opened his Museum and Gallery of the Fine Arts, as he called it, on Holiday Street in 1814, he exhibited a wide range of both fine art and natural history specimens. His collection included portraits of famous Americans, as well as European Old Master paintings on loan from local collectors, and a mastodon that Rembrandt, his father, and brothers had excavated in upstate New York. It was the first prehistoric animal to be exhibited in a museum. So it's no surprise that Lee recognized in the Peel today an ideal platform in historical context in which to present his retrospective of multimedia works that bridge the arts and the sciences as much as they connect with audiences across a wide range of platforms and media. I was lucky enough to encounter Lee's work long before I even realized that the Peel Museum was in Baltimore, though. I first came to Baltimore, in fact, to see the Coen sisters' virtual apartment at the Baltimore Museum of Art in 2004. Later, when I was heading up mobile strategy for the Smithsonian, I was wowed by the Dome Explorer app that Lee created for the National Academy of Sciences. And you can be too when you visit his exhibition at the Peel, as that's one of the artifacts on display. Earlybaltimore.org, again created by the team that Lee now heads up at the Imaging Research Center at UMBC, was the first digital interactive we ever exhibited at the Peel on the museum's birthday in 2017. So I've been a fan of Lee's for nearly 20 years, but I've been particularly thrilled by this opportunity to get to know Lee as an artist and a painter. Seeing this complete body of his works at the Peel has helped me understand that the incredible quality and endurance of the digital experiences he has created is thanks precisely to the fact that he approaches experience design as an artist with an eye on the content and the human encounter with it, rather than just on the technology. I hope you've all had a chance to see this inspiring exhibition as well, or you will soon. There are two more great opportunities to encounter Lee as well. Next, on February 11th, he'll be in the galleries at the Peel, which is now fully renovated and reopened and accessible from 1 to 3 p.m. So that's February 11th. Then on February 12th, online, there will be a roundtable discussion with artists and engineers who will include Anita Komlodi, Tristan King, Tahir Hemphill, Steve Bradley, Eric Schott, Ryan Zuber, and of course, Lee Boot. So with that, I am going to thank Lee one more time for bringing this great exhibition to the Peel, and for all that you've done to help us see our own museum in a new light, thanks to your unique way of bridging the arts and the sciences. And I'll hand it over to you, Lee.
Great. Thank you so much for those words, Nancy, and for telling us about the Peel, which is such an extraordinary place. My main hope tonight is that I won't feel as old as the mastodon that showed up, back when Rembrandt did his renovating. So I just want to, before I switch to my slides, I just want to say thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. This means so much to me, and I just really looking forward to talking with you all. I'm going to run through the show in a kind of an overview way. You really need to come to the museum to see it, because there's almost 2 hours of film and other things to see, but I'll touch on it enough to make sure that everybody knows, what we're talking about, and flesh that out enough. And then at the end of doing that, I have some things I want to share with you about the artistic method, because I know a lot of you out there are artists, many of whom I know, and I just value your opinion so much about this stuff. So I'm going to kind of roll out some sketches, and then we'll have a Q&A after that. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now, and hope all this works out. So if you're seeing the slide fill the whole screen, then I'm a very happy camper, and you're not seeing my notes, that'd be great. Is that all working out, everybody? Can you see it's all good? All right. So yeah, here we are. Before I get started, though, I really need to thank a number of people who have just been so extraordinary throughout this whole year. It's really been a year between the preparation and the show itself. Nancy Proctor, David London, who used to be at the Peel and is now doing great things elsewhere, and Adam Dronberg, Sheila Gaskins, Jeffrey Kent, The Apprentices, Daisy Brown, Mackay Red, Kim Domansky, Heather Shelton, Lexi Tyson, Maya Wilson, Karen Watkins. And also, this show would not be here if it weren't for the help of Maureen Weiss, George Sissel, Michael Saltzman, Ellen Birchnell, and J.D. Tolasek. They helped me design the exhibition. They helped with the essays. It's just been fantastic to have all of your help. So this is what the exhibition looks like in this fabulous La Trobe room at the Peel. Thanks to George, I knew that people would want to sit down and not necessarily just look at flat things on the walls all the time. So you can see there's all these paintings around the edge, and a couple of videos, one projected, one on a monitor. But there's all this nice comfortable seating where you can be in the middle of the larger room and just watch videos until you're tired of me. So there's these big fat pieces of yarn that connect the videos up through the ceiling over to places on the wall where the paintings that inspired the media you can see on the video screens are displayed. So you go through the exhibition, you look at a painting, you see there's a big piece of yarn above the painting that goes over the ceiling and down to a monitor in the middle of the room, and that's how it connects. So it's kind of a unique setup. So as Nancy said, the Peel represents an opportunity to kind of, in a way, go back in time before the arts and sciences and many other disciplines were all carved up, and that's a fabulous thing. And as an artist, I'm trying to foreground the process of art, something I'm thinking of as the artistic method. And part of the reason for that is because I do work with a lot of other disciplines. And, this is something I'll come back to after this kind of tour. But, folks don't really know how artists think very much. We're kind of magical thinkers to people. So I like that aspect, that there's magic to it, that there's some mystery to it for sure. But I also think there are things that that almost all of us do as artists, that there are things that are knowable. You know, there are ideas that that we come to in similar ways. I just want to say, you know, some initial thoughts about this work. This is a social practice. I am concerned with what's happening in our society. It's collaborative and transdisciplinary. So while I won't announce all my collaborators tonight, they are all listed if you see the show. And when the show is online, which will happen, you'll be able to really read the fairly long list of collaborators for many of these media works. But the painting works along the walls are almost all entirely my fault, alone. So you may know that I create experimental prototypes of new media forms and approaches to support public interest. That's the basic log line of this exhibition and of my work overall. But there's a couple of artists that I really need to mention who were a huge influence on me, and really, I think, gave me the courage to follow a sort of a different kind of art practice. So one was my professor in graduate school, the fabulous artist Sal Scarpitta. This is actually part of his racing car that he raced on dirt tracks around the country as an artist, as a kind of performance art, while he was in Leo Castelli's gallery. Nobody knew when they heard this ridiculously loud car roaring around raceways, you know, echoing through Hagerstown and up in Pennsylvania, that he was really a pretty famous artist, certainly in the most famous gallery in New York, the Leo Castelli Gallery, where Warhol and Stella and everybody else were. But there it was. This is the wing from the top of his racing car saying 59, you know, Castelli art. Nobody in Hagerstown had any idea what that meant. And Sal didn't care. You know, he just was completely breaking out of the mold as an artist. It was a big inspiration to me. And this is one image, one gallery from Fred Wilson's Mining the Museum, famous Mining the Museum show. I think it was 1993. And I had the pleasure of working with Fred on the video for that, the lobby video that people saw before they went in, and I got to know him, and it just blew me away the way he was really rethinking the structures of how people make art and the places that the art is seen and who sees it, really shaking things up and, again, inspiring me. So you're seeing here a gallery at the old Maryland Historical Society then, filled with handcrafted chairs, and it says cabinet making on the wall. And there's at the end of the room, there's a post that slaves were actually strapped to and whipped. It's a really traumatic room to see, and it really shook me to my core in many ways. Now you're seeing something else. You're seeing a spacecraft, a Russian spacecraft called Soyuz, that docked with Apollo 11, the American space capsule. And the reason I'm showing this is because when I came to Baltimore in 1980, I went to Washington, D.C. to see the museums right away. And there were so many great art museums then, as there are now. And there was also the Air and Space Museum. And I liked all of it. But when I went to the Air and Space Museum, I just was really struck by this piece sculpturally. You know, here it was the height of the Cold War in many ways. You know, Reagan, I don't think, was even in yet. And you had this beautiful piece of engineering that was creating an image of world peace. You know, these two nations locked in a Cold War, but their space capsules uniting out in space. I just thought it was beautiful. And so the background color of all my slides tonight is the color of that Soyuz spacecraft, because, you know, it's just been my favorite color for 40 years. Okay, so now you're seeing a monitor, a video monitor from about 1990 that has an image of my early video art on it, which was called Making Art with Tape. And I would go around doing social criticism by taping improbable objects together. And I would put these videos on cable access because I was already, I'd worked at the Castelli Gallery for a while, and I'd seen the art world, and I was not sure that I was all in, and I loved showing on cable access because old ladies from Dundalk would call me up and say, I'm seeing this crazy guy on the television doing this stuff. Is that you? And I'd say, yeah, that's me. And she said, what are you doing? Why are you doing this for? You know, what are you doing this for? And we would have these great conversations, and it just felt really encouraging. So that was a big part of how I got my start. And this was my studio in the tiny bedroom next to the one I slept in at the time. This is how we made video. It's a pretty crazy situation. I just came across this slide. And incidentally, here you're seeing an editing studio, video editing studio that an artist could maybe afford to put together back in 1990. This piece, as I said, was cultural criticism. I was already thinking about how we think as a society and really wanting to criticize that. And that has stayed with me this whole time. This is a piece on a monitor. You're now looking at a video monitor, a computer monitor from 1984 that has an image of a work that I did with the Contemporary. I think I was the first artist from around here to show with Baltimore's Contemporary, who did Mining the Museum, George Sissel, and Lisa Corin put that fabulous show together with Fred, and they asked me to do a show after that. And this show was both the Contemporary and the Goethe Institute, and it gave me an opportunity to collaborate with other disciplines for the first time. We talked as part of the soundtrack for this piece. We talked to a philosopher, a neuroscientist, a technologist, and a curator about what was happening at the time, which was neuroscience and the internet, as far as I was concerned. And this was a really formative piece for me because when the reviewers came, when critics came to review the show, they were wanting me to engage on interactivity, which they didn't really understand, I don't think, but they also wanted to talk about, you know, the French philosophers. That was still in everybody's mind, and critical theory. And I was like, neuroscience and the internet are happening, you guys. You know, set down that book you've been reading and just look at what's happening. There's really a different narrative that is beginning to explode. And that was sort of another reason right there where I just steered away from museums and galleries a bit after that, because I thought I have some other people I need to talk with for a little while. But in that work, you're already seeing pieces of stuff that you'll now see in my work right up to the present, you know, this idea of a landscape of connected things, you know, just and lots of connections between everything. We're already there in that piece. After I did that, I started working with a neuroscientist on my video art, and he said, you know, this video art that you do is something that teenagers would really like, and we could use it for education to tell them about their brains. And since I was already into neuroscience for my work, I said, okay. And I was teaching high school, and I knew that the students hated the educational television that they were seeing and media that they were supposed to see. So this neuroscience collaborator, John Schild, said, let's write an abstract to try to go to the the Society for Neuroscience conference in New Orleans in 1997. And I said, you got to be kidding. And he said, no, let's do it. So I did, and we got in. And what you're looking at is the painting I painted for the poster talk that we said we would do in this abstract. So you're seeing a big painting. It's probably 10 feet tall, of a brain and all kinds of piping around it. And there's a brain inside the brain, and there's a brain in a bucket of water. And it was really me starting to explore this idea and how I would get it across to teenagers. So while I was there, I developed a relationship with the NIH, National Institutes of Health, a couple program officers there. And fast forward a couple of years, I learned to write an NIH grant, which was a very hard thing for me to do because I was trained as a painter, not a scientist. But the result was we got the money to do a feature film called Euphoria. And so the next few slides that you're going to see have to do with how we, how the script for that film was birthed. Incidentally, at the Society for Neuroscience, I just have to say there were 24,999 neuroscientists and me. I have never felt so much like a fish out of water in my entire life. It was insane. I just felt, what am I doing here? But you know, we did get the grant. And so the first thing I did was paint a big painting. This is a photograph of a painting that was actually 8 feet high and 24 feet long on my studio wall that I was using to just kind of marinate my brain, just immerse myself in all the literature about brains, because this film was going to be, yes, teaching young people about how their brains work. We felt that they should know. They were being asked to use them. But the NIH was interested in me using all this to steer them away from substance misuse. We called it drug use back then, because they'd just been failing miserably with those stupid campaigns like Just Say No and all that. None of it had worked at all. And so this is me painting about what it feels like to be on drugs. It's painting about brains. It's painting to try to discover the metaphors that I knew I would be using. So you can see some of them emerging here, the trees and stairways and various things. That became a set of little playing cards that I created. So now you're looking at a set of cards that each have an image on them that is a metaphor. And it's a pictorial metaphor. There's like a spaceman and a briefcase and a grave and a clock and a Superman costume. And those are under a bell jar in this exhibit. So they look kind of distorted. And I loved that. And I would take these cards and I would just sit at a bar or at a cafe and I would just kind of lay them out. And I would use it to try to see what the connections between the metaphors were so that I could write the script for Euphoria. And now you're seeing stills from the film, which are all the metaphors, or most of them, that were in that film. So we did a feature film that talked about neuroscience, talked about the pursuit of happiness in America, using nothing but metaphors. Even though there was a soundtrack that explained some things, you know, we didn't explain the metaphors. We just let them unfold. And it worked really well. There was an evaluation of 500 high school students, and they got the neuroscience, and they liked it a lot more than the other video, the sham video they were shown, which was, I think, a documentary called Storm Chasers. And it also caused them to talk to one another about what the film meant, because what you're seeing right now is me in a laundromat holding a plastic rat that I pulled out of a cake. You know, that's one of the metaphors, right? Well, we didn't explain that, right? I was just talking about neuroscience in the background. You saw me pulling this rat out of the cake, but the implication was clearly that inside the substances that you might take to make you feel good, whether it's a cake or cocaine, there's kind of a rat buried in there, if you see what I mean. And so they would, of course, talk to, teenagers would talk to their friends and kind of figure this out, is what the evaluators determined. So the insights that this experiment produced were that we could write a script to turn these ideas about steering kids from substance abuse, the horrible media being made to do that, we could turn that on its head. So instead of making kids feel bad about wanting to feel good, we said, no, you're fine. Everybody wants to feel good. Don't feel bad about it. And we were simply saying there's a better way to do it, that if you if you commit to the pursuit of meaning and engagement, it's much more reliable and sustainable. So the NIH thought that was pretty revolutionary. It didn't seem that revolutionary to me, but there we are. And then we also determined that we could have a film, an educational film for teenagers that is all metaphors. And why not? The music they listen to and everything else they look at is very sophisticated culturally compared to the educational video they see. And this is just, you're seeing a slide now that just describes what I said about the evaluation. Next project I'm going to touch on is a project called Field Trip, which is near and dear to my heart because I was a high school teacher for 16 years. Just taking a sip of my tea here. And I wanted to contribute somehow to improving education in a way that was not as limited as what I had been exposed to while I was teaching in a classroom and working in school systems. So Field Trip was a media project that utilized high school student video blogging. This was brand new in 2007 because they could get these video cell phones suddenly to try to reveal this broader landscape of factors in education. And I'll show you what I mean here. I'm just going to skip to this slide. This is now you're seeing a drawing of all the factors that I thought, many of them that I thought were actually influencing how high school students learned, whether they learned, how much they achieved in their education. And in the middle of the drawing, you see a school building. It's labeled school. And that is where we focused all of our efforts as educational policymakers, as people writing curricula, as people trying to improve how kids learned. We focused entirely on the school and what happened there. We didn't think about the fact that technologies were exploding that distracted them, or the fact that they came from different backgrounds that may have had different amounts of reverence and role model representation and a million other factors that could influence how motivated, how able a young person is to do well at school. I mean, one of the reasons I did Euphoria is I became aware that my students were, many of them were living in their cars. They were traumatized by all kinds of factors that had nothing to do with what was going on in the school building. So this is a drawing that just kind of laid that out. And we got another grant from the NIH, and we started making these short films following these 7 teenage filmmakers' ideas about their education. And they were doing these video blogs. They were giving us footage from their video cell phones that Nokia donated. And we had editors working around the clock. And this young man here had an idea. Well, I know one thing that keeps me from learning. All these students were exploring what was either helping them or hurting their ability to learn. And he said, I hate that I'm in history class and we're learning about democracy, but my high school is a dictatorship. So here you see a young man standing on a chair, yelling back and forth at the teacher who's sitting on a huge king's throne in the corner of the classroom. And so we would post these films on this special website where there were 70 other high school students, just to see if they would talk about it, just to see if this would spur them to talk about things that related to their education. And this is a still from another one of those films. This is about the school to prison pipeline. And what we found is, yes, they talked about it a lot. We made 76 films in 28 days. Here, I'll go to the next slide and you can see that. And again, posted for 70 peers. And there were about 500 discussion comments that mapped beautifully onto the motivation literature. So we were able to publish numerous articles about this. We went back to the NIH, said, give us more money. Unfortunately, the institute that we originally got the grant from had completely dissolved, and the NIH was rapidly turning away from media-based solutions for doing anything. We did find that digital storytelling in the voice of stakeholders was the thing that I think made this so successful. And that when a young person who you can relate to is talking about what is hampering their ability to focus in school, that's going to have a lot more effect than when some adult comes to you from on high and tells you what they think you should do. This next project is called Speak Health, and it was a project to engage the public on the subject of integrative medicine. So now you're seeing a poster that's in the exhibition that's just a little bit of material from that project. And the top of the poster, you now see a slide that's zooming in on that, is a kind of a webbing diagram, a bubble diagram, where we worked with the Institute for Integrative Medicine Health actually to map what this integrative health idea they wanted to roll out to the general public, how that crashed into different American narratives around health. Here they wanted to introduce this brand new idea of integrative health. Some people call it alternative health or complementary health. And that's just not really where Americans were. So we wanted to map that out, and we did. And we used that to write a bunch of films and to create a bunch of films to, again, put online so that people could have click on these. Now you're seeing what our web interface was. They could click on all these buttons that talk about value and balance and relationships and community and sustainability and all these ideas that you might not think relate to health, but actually relate to health a lot. And they could see these crazy films that we're making. Now, this all sounds fine so far, right? What could go wrong? Well, we made these films, but of course, I'm not really like an educational filmmaker. I mean, that's why Field Trip worked and Euphoria worked, because I make wacky films, right? So, we said to this organization, we said, look, you don't have Brad Pitt out, telling your story to the rest of the population. That could make it popular. But we could make some films that might get them talking, like we do with Field Trip. So what you're seeing right now is part of a heart, a beating heart that we animated that was orbiting the Earth. And the reason we were doing that is because there was this great literature that showed that a sense of community, that's what the heart imagery is about, social relationships, is actually a huge factor in heart disease. I won't even go into the research right now, but we thought that was astounding. People who live in a tight-knit community have far less heart disease. So we have this beating heart circling the Earth. It roars through the atmosphere, crashes into a suburban cul-de-sac. So now you see some guy who's been bounced out of bed. He's looking out his blinds at the flaming, grassy area in the middle of the cul-de-sac where this burning heart is. Because the suburban cul-de-sac at that point in America, according to the other literature we were reading, had become places where it looks like there's community, right? There's a circle of houses, but nobody talks to each other. And so we were just trying to make this point. Well, that all sounds fine. Again, when we showed this at a conference of all these doctors that were working in integrative health in Minneapolis, they were just completely freaked out. One woman ran screaming from the room and told me after that I traumatized her, which I felt terrible about. But I was just making films that I thought would get people talking about these ideas. Anyway, I think we scared them. And so eventually I had to walk away from the project because it turned out that what they really wanted and probably should have had was just a nice newsletter that came out to people who were interested and talked about integrative health. And we were really trying to start a broader cultural conversation with some controversial material. So, we learned in this project that the culture of who you're working with matters as much as the culture that you're wanting to address, which seems so obvious in retrospect, but at the time I just wasn't thinking. So this next project, that was a little bit disturbing. We'd gone down that road for a couple of years. we decided to do something else as a research lab at the IRC where I work. I was associate director at that time. This was just when colleges and universities were beginning to understand their role as anchor institutions in communities, in cities, in towns, much more seriously than they had for a long time. And so I just said to our folks at the lab, look, we're just going to go out and start interviewing people because we're making media and we never really talk to people unless they're in the audience at one of our films. So let's just hire a producer to pick people randomly, and let's just ask them, go interview them and ask them what it's like to be them living where they live when they live there. Really, we put our research on hold, our regular research on hold, just to connect our lab, our research center, to the community through this process. So we interviewed lots and lots of folks, and I was hearing so much that underlined what we were all thinking in the IRC at that time, which is that culture itself, which you could hear from what I described a minute ago, which we were already thinking about, right, is maybe the biggest single influence on our discretionary behaviors. So in addition to listening to all these folks talk about their lives and just remind us of how differently people live and how rich and fascinating their backgrounds are, we also started talking to a lot of experts about culture and about what it meant, psychologists, priests, social scientists. And we did a project called Who We Am, which resulted in a film about this process, but we just showed it kind of professionally. There was no research associated with it yet. And I was also at that time doing these paintings to try to, I guess I was really trying to figure out, you know, if you could see culture, what would it look like? So in the last slide, you're seeing all these people we interviewed. You're seeing little pictures of people, kind of looks like a Zoom meeting now. This is long before Zoom. And you're seeing one interview in the middle. And this is what's playing in my head while I'm painting these paintings. All these voices are in my head. And I'm just trying to kind of map it out. And again, painting is my go-to way of thinking. It's my way of seeing. It's my way of thinking. You know, we do a lot of interactive work and VR and all this exotic media stuff. But frankly, my ability to kind of venture that far from the mothership, you know, to get out into all these new technologies and new ways of using them is really only as good as the tether I have that takes me back to the traditions of art, right? Like the strength of that connection is what enables me to go out into kind of never land. So now you're seeing a painting that looks like a crazy bubble diagram. And another one, you can see me scratching my head here because these are stills from the fact that I film all my paintings because, again, I'm interested in sharing the creative process. So this is another similar painting. This is how that painting sort of finished up. And the other thing that you can start to see here is that I'm seeing I'm not only hearing kind of cultural voices, but I'm starting to see layers of systems. This is like plumbing layered under roots of trees that are growing all around it. And then like electrical conduits or something. I don't even know what they are painted on top of that. But I was just starting to think in terms of overlaid systems at that point with this Who We Am project. So that actually led to a diagram about culture, which you see is the central film in this Zoom-like picture. Again, I've returned to that, and you can see this film at the Peel. But what we learned in Who We Am, which is like a 5-year meditation on culture that produced films and a lot of big grant applications, but not grants. I'd love to tell you about all the failed grants because I think there's wonderful ideas in them, but apparently the NSF and NIH didn't agree with me at that particular time. But now everything that we do in the Imaging Research Center, and that I think about with my work, is resting on this idea of culture, which now, of course, you can't pick up a business book that doesn't talk about that, right? But back in 2010, when we started Who We Am, nobody was talking about it. We could go and talk about our work and people would say, what are you talking about, culture? Are you saying I should go to the symphony more? What are you talking about, exotic cultures? And we would say, no, culture, the narrative, the script that holds us all together. But it's a pretty foreign idea, as it turns out, in our society, in our civilization. So that led to the final project in this show, in this exhibition. Not the last one I'm going to talk about tonight, but the last one in that room of the show. There's another room, but in that central room of the La Trobe, this last project called the C Project actually brings us up to date. We're still working on this project. And this project picks up on that layering of systems that you were seeing in those culture-based paintings that I was doing for all that time. And C is an acronym. It stands for Systems Exploration and Engagement Environment. And the guiding thought behind this research, which has gone on for 7 years now, is that these intractable challenges that we seem to have as a civilization, whether it's getting a fix on, getting a grip on climate change or opioid addiction or income inequality, is really hard because we can't see these problems. We can't really even imagine them because none of the media that we have are intended to show complex systems. They're all derivations of the book, right? The book gives you one word, one thought at a time. A PowerPoint presentation, like the one I'm doing now, is no different. When I go to the next slide, this slide will completely disappear. There's no connections between all the different thoughts unless you are carrying that narration in your head. Some people say the connections between things are the most important thing, but that's the one thing that's not shown at all in a PowerPoint. And of course, your cell phone is the worst because it's like a drill bit. It's a tiny little window. What you can see maybe two things at a time on your cell phone, right? So this C project is an attempt to build a new kind of media that will make it possible for us to see complex systems. So now you're seeing some exercises that we've done to try to imagine what this could look like. Now you're seeing a big painting. Again, I'm always working things out in painting. And this is actually, this is a painting that I worked with a vocalist. She's actually my sister-in-law, the famous soprano, Antoinette Arnold, who wants to teach the history of vocal music to her students, but she wants to do it in some extravagant 3D environment, she was telling me. And I'm like, oh, well, we're kind of working on something like that. Let's see if we can figure out where you would put everything and what it would look like. So believe it or not, what you're seeing right now, this big painting that has like a globe at the bottom of it, and it looks like a big salad bowl on top of it, which she thinks of as different forms of orchestration. And on top of that, you see like, it looks like 4 discs, like CDs, and they're actually different vocal registers, bass, baritone, alto, soprano, et cetera. And so she worked with me to kind of map out where you would put things if you were going to use 3D space, which we are for this work, to try to show a complex system all in the same place at the same time. Now you're seeing another painting, another problem, similar. This is an attempt to map out the reasons behind white flight from major cities in post-war America toward the end of the Great Migration of Blacks moving from the rural South to the industrial North. And they again wanted to use the incredible capacity of virtual 3D worlds to map this out. And we said, well, let's see how we might be able to arrange that. So you're actually seeing an image. The red thing is an image of the United States as if you're kind of suspended in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and you're looking out, past the Atlantic seaboard into the rest of the country. And you can see down below, this was what we figured out in this painting, that we could put history under the map. Doesn't that make sense? I mean, duh, why not? Why wouldn't you put history under the map? So that's what you see here is there's like a slave ledger, and there's these images of cells that are kind of a way of describing phrenology, and some of the mythology and hate in a way that the country was built on, in addition to all the great things that Americans are proud of. And you see these two classical pillars, these capitals that are rocketing up like a mercurial rise that our country did so quickly, such a new country. And they're blasting off like rockets. There's actually really nothing holding them up. You know, we just borrowed a bunch of neoclassical imagery, and then we built a bunch of institutions that made it look like we were a really established country, you know, big neoclassical structures, which in turn did things like redlining. So the map you see in the middle of the painting is the HOLC map, 1937. That's redlining, and you can see an indication of white flight from there. So now you're seeing, these are more drawings before I show you images of the actual media. This is the amount of stuff we wanted to start to put in 3D virtual computer-generated places to start to put some of these ideas into practice. This is just a drawing. This is just a sketch that shows people's faces and ideas, idea maps and everything. But what you can see is you can see them in relationship to one another. Whereas when everything is just in a long list, you lose that relationship. This is another image of that. This is a still from a film, but we're just starting to work through it. We started to build our own software. So this is a mapping software that shows, you know, you could load any map in the United States, and you could do a mind map. You could do a 3D bubble diagram. We worked with communities in Baltimore. We were still doing that and still are regularly to map their concerns. So this is a map of issues that we heard about when interviewing folks in the greater Penn North community of West Baltimore. This is working in Morrell Park in Southwest Baltimore. All we're doing is we're taking a map and we're creating a bubble diagram of the issues that they cared about. We're photographing and filming the places that they live, and we're starting to put all that together in the same 3D spaces. This image, and the last image you saw, incidentally, was a little church and community center from Morrell Park. Now you're seeing an image of all the factors in something that's called high-intensity drinking. And I was working with the NIH. There's an epidemic of high-intensity drinking in this country, and there's way more factors than any researcher can keep in their head. And so we said, well, we have an idea. So we actually came up with a little logo, like a little symbol of every single idea. So all these strange shapes you're seeing float around in this bizarre environment are actually symbols of different factors related to high-intensity drinking. And we showed this to the researchers, and, you know, it was like they were going to jump out the window. You know, it just looked so completely alien and crazy to them. They're like, why would you ever do that? And we're saying, well, how many issues can you hold in your head now? And of course, we knew the answer is about 7 because we knew the research. And they're like, well, we have the minutes from the meeting, you know, and I'm like, I don't know. We've got to try something different. So I'm just showing you experiments. We're taking films, we're putting them in 3D space. This is a project called Treasures, where we're putting family heirlooms in 3D space around communities. We're kind of putting everything in the kitchen sink in 3D spaces. This is the current version of this software, where we can put data graphs on any map in the world. And it's in this fabulous virtual reality environment. You can walk around, you can look in it, you can change the data, and you can also see videos at the same time. So we're combining qualitative and quantitative information, because one contextualizes the other, right? So you're looking at all this data. Well, you know, people are not charts, you know, people are not graphs. Where's the urgency of helping people if, you know, you're just seeing a bar chart of people dying? So this is a video. This happens to be the first woman who was allowed into the University of Maryland Law School, an interview that we did. But you get the idea with this space. And you can also do conceptual mapping, all in the same contiguous space. We are a long ways from being able to create, to map entire systems but we are making great progress. When we put things in 3D space to describe complex systems, we think it'll be really boring if it's just bubble diagrams and charts. So we want to put art in there as well. What you're seeing now is a fountain sculpture that's projected on the wall in the exhibition. And it's actually a diagram of an economic development plan by two social scientists, two economists. One is Kamala Harris's dad, Donald Harris, and the other is Flooney Hutchinson, who have a brilliant economic plan that I won't bore you with, but even though it's quite exciting if you're into economics, but everything in this sculpture actually means something. It's there's a key that tells you, oh, these horns mean community input and output, and the funny little shapes floating up in the air are cultural activity upon which they think economic development must be based. And you're seeing a big copper network structure, kind of a fence, an armature that goes around this, which they think is something called trust capital, without which you can't build social capital, which is represented by these interlocking cubes. And this is a virtual sculpture that you can see in virtual reality by putting goggles on. And if you walk up to the edge of this fountain, you'll see that it's as deep as it is tall. So it's a 30-foot high virtual sculpture. The pool of water underneath it is 30 feet deep. And there's all this history and assets and trauma down there. Now, these are just two little paintings I'm just showing one in this slideshow, but I did two little paintings where I'm just trying to imagine what it actually looks like in places where two systems collide. You know, is it like a biological thing? Is it like a train wreck? I have no idea. I'm just imagining and painting. It's what I do. This is a little ink painting that's on the wall in there. But the SEA project, you know, as I said, it's gone on for 7 years. There's been all kinds of false starts. But we've finally done a successful round of testing with the software that I've been showing you guys. And it seems to be very successful for public health and emergency health people to be able to get to the data they want and to contextualize that data. Now, because I'm an artist, the reason I'm doing this is, of course, because I'm an artist. I'm not afraid of seeing the big mess. You know, artists can paint a landscape and we don't need to remove the barn if we're not going to paint it. We can just paint around it. You know, it doesn't freak us out to look at the woods. But you have to understand, this is very controversial in the world of science. Science is reductive. They want to look at one thing at a time, one thing that they can measure, which is brilliant. I mean, you know, we've managed to double the human lifespan and eliminate 80% of famine around the world. I'm a big fan. But the problems we have left are the problems you can't solve that way. And that's why we have these systemic, so-called wicked problems with us. So that's the nature of this. The goal that has emerged is to just try to use these incredible media technologies to really change the way we think about some of these enormous challenges. And finally, I just want to share a couple of commissions that I did for the National Academy of Sciences, because they're actually very connected to the bigger projects that my lab did that I've just shown you. And one is called See Into It. It's kind of a little play on words there, as in see into it, or see into it, as in I intuit this, part of the word intuition. The National Academy of Sciences gave me a commission to do whatever I wanted on the National Mall for this first USA Science Expo, Science and Engineering Expo. I think it was 2013. And so I created a mobile booth to teach people about their intuition, because there's been a lot of research that shows how it works. Human intuition is the main asset that we artists bring to our work, that musicians bring to their work, that poets bring to their work, actually that scientists bring to their work. They're just not allowed to talk about it. in their grants or in their papers. And it's the most amazing thing that the human brain does. I mean, if calculation was the most amazing thing, we wouldn't have pocket calculators that are so much faster than we are. Intuition is the most amazing thing, and it's not instinct, it's not emotion, it's completely cerebral. If you are a creative person, you know this. It's our core asset. So this is a painting I did first about the project for the National Academy that now is owned by the National Academy, the cultural programs down there. It's been in a show down there, and it was published in their book Consilience. You can see this is a head. So you're seeing a painting as if you can see through a head and see, oh, there's brain parts, there's fireworks, there's tangled up trees, and there's this yellow spirally thing behind the ear. If you can see, there's kind of an ear in the lower right. There's this spirally yellow thing with a red spot in the center. That's actually the part of your brain that gets all heated up when you're using your intuition. And it's a reasonably well mapped out process in terms of what it does. And when that gets hot, or active, I should say, there's an inhibitory pulse from your parietal lobe that tells the rest of your brain to be quiet. You know, sometimes if you're trying to recall a name, if you're trying to use your intuition, you just need to tell everybody to shut up for a minute so you can think. That's something that your brain does. And so this is the booth that we created. Rolls around, and you can look through these 4 peepholes. And when you do, you see these 4 films, 1 in each hole. And the films are each of something entirely different, it looks like. But there's a message there that says, look, all these films were taken in the same place at the same time around a very common occurrence that happens all around the world every day. What do you think that common occurrence was? So we're asking people to use their intuition, right? And all these people are coming to this booth over the course of a few days, and they're texting their ideas about what the event was, which appear on this big screen and everything. And anyway, thing is, I'm not going to tell you what it is. If you text me, maybe I'll tell you later, but you have to go to my show. And then you can lift up the little paper thing and you can see what the event is. But, you know, you're seeing an image right now of 4 circles from 4 different films. And one is like a sunrise. The other is like some kind of animal hide. The other is like some tubes. And another one is some kind of plumbing switch and a big like red button where it looks like you could turn something off. So you'll just have to use your intuitions, your imagination. The other project we did with the National Academy was something called Dome Explorer. So if you go to the national headquarters of the National Academy of Sciences on the Mall in Washington, D.C., it's a beautiful building. I highly recommend it. Beautiful sculpture of Einstein out in front of it. And there's a 60-foot tall dome in that space, in the Great Hall, just after you get past the entranceway. It looks like this if you look straight up at it. But it's 60 feet high. And this artist who painted on that dome painted these beautiful icons of all the different scientific disciplines, but they're so far away from the visitor that they can't tell what they are. So they hired us to build an iPad app to give visitors so that people could click on these, they could hold it over their heads, they could hold the iPad app over their heads as if they were looking through it at the ceiling, and just touch one of the little icons, the painted icons as they appear on the iPad app, and it would give them a readout. It would tell them what that icon means. Very useful little tool. And it would describe it and all that. So now I'm showing you the ceiling of the dome, and I'm showing you what you would see when you clicked on those icons, right? And so we did this kind of as a relationship building project. We'd already done one successful project with them. We wanted to do more. We don't normally just do contract work like this, but we did it because we loved working with them. And it was successful. And so they said, okay, that's great. We love this thing, but now we want you to do another project, which is to add to that application information about how science has evolved since Hildreth Maier painted that dome in 1924. So I said, fine, but we're going to need to interview the Nobel Prize winners and other famous scientists because I don't know how science has evolved. And they agreed. Can you believe this? And so J.D. Talasek, the director of cultural programs, who I love, and who wrote an essay for our booklet here for this show, he and I flew around the country and we got to interview Craig Venter, the guy who cracked the human genome, and Bob Lefkowitz, who discovered the G protein receptor. That's why your antihistamines work. And Eric Kandel, who discovered how an individual neuron remembers. His family was half killed in the Holocaust. Brilliant man. And, when you win a Nobel Prize, you kind of say whatever is on your mind. You're not really worried about your career anymore, I guess. So the thing they told us, this is the iPad app as it developed. Now you can see I'm about to commit the same mistake that I made with that Speak Health project, right? Where I forget that I'm working with a bunch of scientists in the National Academy. I can't just do whatever I want, but I always forget that. So these scientists were telling us, you know what, those little disciplines and those neat little octagons or whatever they are, hexagons, that's not how science works at all. Science is a mess. It's completely crazy. We invent new disciplines whenever we want to. We made them all up. They don't make any sense now. They never made any sense, right? So this is when you click on the little blue ball on the ceiling of the dome on the iPad app, this tree grows out of the ceiling, right? Which looks insane. And it turns into this crazy environment where there's bubbles that different disciplines are coming and going. And there's this iPad app I had a brilliant young programmer work on this. A lot of it is created procedurally, randomly, by the iPad itself at the time you're looking at it. So this never really looks the same twice. And if you click on the little geometric shapes, you get to read what a famous scientist said. So here's Craig Venter, cracked the human genome. He says, it's hard to separate everything into nice little bundles that the university systems have used for teaching departments. And yet I work at a university, which I love. Johns Hopkins is a couple blocks away from me. We still do this stuff, even though the top scientists in the country are like, what are you doing? Everything's still siloed in disciplines. Okay, my current favorite part of the exhibition is this last slide I'm going to show you. With this exhibition, I had planned to launch a study on artistic method so that we can begin to explain it to the scientists so that they're not as nervous working with us. Oh, I forgot to say, they actually did not freak out with the iPad app that we created with the tree growing out of the ceiling of the dome entirely. It took them like a year to freak out. And so for a year, people came in and they got that iPad app. And then eventually, I think some of the scientists are going, wait a minute, this is very wacky. And we're not sure what people are going to walk away with. So, we'll just have to tell Lee, we'll come back to this at some other time. Anyway, but this is my attempt to start to remedy this, to make it so that scientists, so that we're just not as out there to them. And so I'm asking visitors to the show to just grab one of the sticky notes. It's all over this table in this room, and write some part of their artistic process, some part of any of their creative process on a sticky note and paste it to this wall. I took this picture like a month ago. Now it is papered. You can't fit another sticky note on this wall. There's probably 3 times as many as what you're seeing here. I'm so excited about it, because I couldn't launch the study that I talked about, which was going to be me interviewing all these different artists, because nobody has signed up yet. And I haven't had a chance to advertise it. There's just a little thing at the exhibition that says, email me if you're interested in the study, but who wants to sit for an hour-long interview, which is what they'd have to do. So anyway, blah, blah, blah. This is going very well. The sticky note part of this study is killing it. All right. Now I'm going to share something else with you guys. Going back to all these indications that are in these sticky notes of how people come up with original ideas for their artwork, for their poetry, whatever. At the root of that, I believe, this is my hypothesis, are certain commonalities that artists share. Certain parts of our process, we all practice it differently, just like scientists practice the scientific method somewhat differently. Those two scientists are the same. I understand that there's all that difference, but I'm trying to map out what I think some of the similarities are. So I'm kind of taking a risk here tonight. I'm going to share some early sketches about what I think this process looks like. I would love to hear from you about your thoughts on this. This is, again, very new. This has no meaning until I get to talk to a lot of artists and do more data research on it, but it's a beginning. It's an attempt to kind of conceptualize it based on some discussions between artists I know and myself. So now you're seeing a diagram on the screen that has three big circles. One says ideation, a word not everybody is familiar with, or it means having ideas, the word production, and the word immersion. So three big circles that overlap, and like a big Venn diagram. And in the middle is another circle called intuition, that's labeled intuition. And there's a line that goes out to the word production and immersion and ideation in these other three circles. So what I'm saying here is that I believe that artists use their intuition to guide them through a process of having ideas, of immersing themselves, whether in the landscape that they're painting or in some environment or some subject, and also they're producing work. And those three things together create the ideas for the artwork that then continues and evolves, right? So it's a kind of back and forth between having ideas, producing them, and immersing ourselves in different worlds. And we use these tools, these little quirky tools, to kind of go through this process. So I'm going to show you maybe 6 or 7 little diagrams of Lee's idea of what I think these tools might be. You're going to have your own ideas, and I would love to hear what they are. But, we observe. Artists observe a lot. It's why we're good at navigating culture. You notice the things around you if you're an artist, if you're a visual artist in particular, because you have to. I think all artists do, but you really have to. So you observe yourself, you observe people, you observe things and places. And we have our senses engaged as much as we can, which gets really tiring. And a lot of artists I know really need to find ways to turn that off. Because you're just kind of vibrating with your senses on overload way too much of the time. Artists have too good a radar often. We try to locate the human meaning in stories and information and in things that happen. Let me give you an example. When we were doing the film Euphoria that was based on neuroscience, right? I'm working with these neuroscientists who had already discovered that brains grow and change based on how you challenge them. It's called neuroplasticity. And they just went on to discover the next famous thing after that, the next, monumental discovery after that. They didn't really think about it. They were just doing their work. But I'm teaching high school at the time. And I'm thinking, these kids in my class who are worried they might not be smart enough, I think would think it's pretty profound if you told them they can change their brain based on what they do. And there's a million stories like that, not a million maybe, but dozens of stories that have come up like that as I've worked with scientists over the years. I love scientists because they're dispassionate about it often. They just discover something that is monumental and then they move on. And we wonder why the larger culture is not always keyed into science to the degree it should be. And it's really the rest of the culture saying, well, what have you done for me lately other than my cell phone, which is nagging me all the time? We find hidden structures and concepts. We kind of have like a kind of X-ray vision. Now, it seems like I'm really building up artists a lot here, and I am. I'm really pro-artists. I love all of you who are artists and musicians because I think you do this just naturally. You see structures behind things that other people might not see, or they might have to come about it a different way. And of course, we can do reason. We're not incapable of it. So we use reason all the time for our work. So these are just little sketches that kind of remind me of that thing. And there's this tradition in the arts as well, it's in music too, called call and response, right? So we try something, we paint it, we build it, we look at it, we go, no, that's a bad idea. Or we look at it and we go, well, now it needs red over here, or now I'm going to turn it inside out. And I'm, and then we do that. And then we look at it and then it tells us something else. So we're in this dialogue with our work all the time. The brilliant theorist Barbara Stafford writes brilliantly about this in the book, Echo Objects. And we embrace ambiguity. Now, in science, ambiguity is something you want to eliminate, but in art, it's really useful because if you're embracing ambiguity, you're allowing yourself to stay with the mess long enough for the ideas to suggest themselves. And if you keep ambiguity in there with your artwork, once it's finished, people can tailor the meaning of it to their own lives. And they're going to reflect and discuss it more. So it's this huge tool. I'm not telling you anything you don't know if you're an artist. But again, I'm doing this because we want to be able to communicate artistic method to people who are not as practiced in it. Now, this part is really not finished at all. I call this the 7 A's. And this is kind of what we make. We don't just make objects. We make sort of experiences, right? Eventually, these will have to be very unique shapes. They're not just going to be circles like a pearl necklace like this. But the 7 A's are aesthetics. You're seeing another diagram with these bubbles with words in them on circles of different colors. And the words are aesthetics, attention, affect, meaning emotion, aspiration, a big part of art throughout history. We make artifacts. Of course we do. We make things people can touch, see, watch. We make analogies as a way to explain things. And again, we use ambiguity all the time. This is a close-up of that. And when we create those experiences, this is a ring of experiences, the process that we hope unfolds in a viewer is what you're seeing here. You're seeing, again, these 3 big circles I talked about initially, ideation, production, and immersion. And in the middle of that is another kind of a ball. And on one side, it's yellow, and on the other side, it's blue. And there's 2 words, transformation and revelation. 2 experiences that happen after the ambiguity, after the emotion. Great art changes us. And we see something about the world that maybe we didn't see before. That's the revelation piece. And ultimately, those lead to, and this is why artists need to work with scientists and others, and they with us, nonstop on all of our great challenges, is because these challenges, people are dying unnecessarily in the pandemic because of culture. They are, the world is in trouble because of climate change, which we are not addressing because of culture, right? Culture, coming back to this, it's how we locate our identities. Our identity is a location in the broader cultural landscape. Well, the arts are the language of culture. So all of these pieces of the artistic process, ultimately, in my view, lead to expanding the cultural imagination and catalyzing cultural evolution. And, we've gotten as far as we can as a civilization, I think, without focusing on this the way many ancient civilizations did. They didn't all believe that you could just solve all your problems with gadgets and money. They knew that you had to build culture. And that's, that's the last slide of this particular talk. So I'll be interested to hear what you guys say about that. We're going to have, I've gone too long, no big surprise, but we'll still have 15, 20 minutes for conversation. I have a couple more thank yous before I turn it over to that. These are big. My wife, Stacey Arnold, my daughter, Lily, my son, Max, Dan Bailey, who is a friend and was the previous director of the Imaging Research Center, without whom I would certainly have never been there. Brilliant man and a mentor of mine. Jane Brown, who has supported my work. John Chester, my original co-producer, brilliant filmmaker. If you haven't seen Big Little Farm, you must see it. And Capella Fahum, who is our producer, Capella Fahum Brogdon, David London, who initially approached me about having my show in the Peel, Denise Griffin Johnson, a major collaborator in West Baltimore, a lovely person, and the IRC staff and students who have put up with me this year when I really have not been entirely focused on everything I should be. And that's Ryan Zuber, Anita Kumladi, Tristan King, Zhao Feiji, and Kyle Davis. Finally, this talk is dedicated to Michael Barnes, who is my first collaborator and supporter, and really my brother, even though he's a cousin. He passed away in December. So thanks for listening to me ramble for over an hour. And now I'm going to stop sharing my slides. And I'm back. I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I hope I made some sense, and I'm really interested to hear any questions that you have. And I don't know who's going to call on them, but I hope it's not me, because I can't see everybody. There's things in the chat. Oh,
I'll be happy to call on some folks, Lee, but I'm also happy to kick off with the question. This was just such a fabulous and inspiring talk, and I'm so glad this is recorded, because there are many things that you've said that I want to be able to quote. I'm just wondering if you feel like in the landscape of the NEHs and the NIHs and all of the NSFs and all of these bodies that provide the funds to do the kind of research that has been so integral to your work, are they starting to get the message that, as you put it much better than I tried to kind of capture it quickly, that the arts are the key to changing the culture, which are the key to saving lives and to saving the planet? Are they starting to get that? Or do you feel that we're still too separated by this arts and science divide?
To be honest, Nancy, I feel we are still way too separated by this divide. You know, it took us centuries to get here, and it's going to take a long time to unwind that. Yes, now at the edges, there are people who, cross-pollinate with other disciplines. But I just came back from a 2-day climate conference, right? Some of the best top climate scientists in the world. It's a $20 million grant to predict how quickly to narrow our predictions of how quickly the oceans are going to rise based on the polar ice caps melting. No money, not a dime, was put in the budget, even for visualization that would allow the different scientists to communicate with each other, which they're freaking out about because they have no way to do it. They don't look at the same data. But there's nothing to communicate with the general public. This is nobody's fault. This is just the way these things happen by default. And, you know, I have stopped submitting NIH grants as the principal investigator, which I started out my research career doing, because as soon as they smell that there's an artist at the helm of this project, it's not going to happen. They'll find some way to say, you've just got to cross another T or dot another I. So I can't be that encouraging, but that's why I think we need to start by at least sharing with them how we think.
Lee, it's this whole idea is just Jeff here. How you trying to bring all these disciplines together and how important it is for the survival of the planet reminds me of the story of the patient. You know, he has all these things going on, all these issues, but all the doctors are seeing him separately. So one doctor doesn't know what the other doctor's doing, and unless he has a patient advocate that brings all these people together, it's like for naught. You know, the one drug he's getting has a side effect, and you know, I mean, I think it's a pretty good analogy.
It's a great analogy.
And I have a question for you. That one thing that looks so surreal, looked like a Gorky painting. Oh my God! I think if you sold prints of that, I mean, I'd buy one instantaneously. I thought it was really cool.
Well,
You
good.
know,
Maybe I'll do that because
yeah, I highly recommend it because I just couldn't stop looking at it,
well,
as well as
thank
your
you.
other
That's so
artwork.
nice. That's so nice to hear. Thank you so much. I've been so busy doing this other stuff that I really have not even thought about showing in galleries and museums. I wouldn't even be showing now if it weren't for the Peel and how terrific it is. But I'm going to change that. I'm
What a great
definitely
way to raise funds and make some
exactly.
money.
No, totally,
I'll be quiet.
totally. No, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. Your analogy, incidentally, about the doctor is terrific. Well, in fact, the former head of the NIH, Francis Collins, a doctor, just stepped down a few months ago, totally exhausted because he's like, in the pandemic, he's like, people are dying of culture. And here I am running this National Institutes of Health. That's literally what he said to the news. You can find this online. It's amazing.
Lee, you've got a question in the chat from
Oh, good. Let me look in the
Dean
chat.
Lewis, I think it is, about your interests growing up, science, art, education. What got you on this path?
Oh, what a great question. Actually, I had in mind to go into that a little bit, but I'm glad I didn't because then we wouldn't have time for questions. So my upbringing, I'll just very quickly mention, my mom was a musician and my dad was a bench chemist for GE. So in a way, kind of, there you have it, right? But I also grew up in Schenectady, New York. And I know Martha Lowe is on this call, so she knows what I'm talking about. I grew up in Schenectady, New York, which most people think is like, where Schenectady? Are you kidding me? What is that? The thriving megalopolis that is Schenectady, right? I actually grew up in a suburb of Schenectady called Niskayuna, which, if that doesn't sound like the most obscure place on earth, I don't know what does, except that it was the home to GE Global Research, the most powerful corporate entity in the world, and the home of Knowles Atomic Power Lab. And the first television broadcast, here I am a media artist now, the first commercial broadcast happened 2 blocks from my house. I really didn't know about most of this stuff when I was growing up. I mean, my girlfriend's dad won the Nobel Prize. That should have been a clue, but I was just a kid going to high school. I had no idea. But it wasn't until years later that some of these things started to kind of shake down.
I have a question.
Please.
And I want to say thank you so much, Lee. I just adore your work.
Thank you, Laura.
The clarity, the humor. It's, as soon as I saw the chair with the monitor, with the cord going to the painting, I was like, oh, like real life hyperlinks got going in the 3D space. So, and the reference to painting, and painting is a way of thinking, and I think you've got it all mapped out. Like, it's just fantastic. The process, the creative process. I love the Venn diagrams of that. So it's just such a pleasure. I'm wondering about Euphoria, and if there's a continuing life for Euphoria. It's such a wonderful thing. And hearing you talk about the interaction with high schoolers and young people, it's really great. So I'm just curious what's happening there.
We had such a great time making that film, and it got in a bunch of festivals, and we sold a bunch of it. We eventually got distribution on Amazon when they were just really starting to do that. But now it's, films have a shelf life, as you know. And so now it's more or less dormant. We don't sell it anymore. So I put it on Vimeo. I should probably share that link somewhere so anybody can just watch it. I still hear from people, not rarely. I captured a bunch of the Amazon. I love this. I captured a bunch of the Amazon reviews before they went away, because they flushed them out occasionally. And I don't know, maybe there was 100 or something. And half of them were like, oh my God, this is the coolest film I ever saw, it changed my life. The other half are like, this is the worst film I've ever seen in my life, you know? So they just thought it was completely wacky. So like, I think it came out an even 3 stars. I'm not sure. But if you're interested in seeing Euphoria again, you can do that. And at the exhibition, there's about 20 minutes worth of clips from it.
Yeah, I'd love to see. It seems so evergreen. I'd love to see schools pick it up again because it's hard to
Excellent.
get high school talking. So that's great. Thank you.
I think the 50-50 means you're doing something right, Lee.
Let's hope so, Jeff. I don't know sometimes. I really don't know. I just kind of do it. I'm looking in the chat. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything.
Yeah, so there's a question just came in. Listening to your work, art and science, perhaps we can think about art as a scientific process, inquiry, experimentation, observation. What are your thoughts?
Well, I do think that science can study artistic method. As you saw, we have studied, not we scientists, but as a people, we have studied intuition itself, which I think is kind of the nuclear reactor of art in a way. And I'm hoping to do a qualitative study with artists. Here's something I'd really like to do. I'd like to be able to, so if you want to study this too, here's an idea. We go to PBS and we ask them for the transcripts to all of the Art 21 interviews over the years. And we do a deep dive data analysis of the text in those Art 21s. And we find out what the commonalities are. And we do a qualitative analysis and we define what the themes are, and then we code it all by the themes. That would actually be a wonderful tool right there. I really think it's very doable. And I don't think it diminishes what artists do at all. We know what the scientific method does, and that didn't make the vaccine any less impressive to me. I don't know about you guys.
Beautiful.
Oh.
Sorry, please go ahead.
I just wanted to thank you. I thought it was a brilliant talk. And thanks for giving encouragement to warm up to the concept of ambiguity. I've always had difficulty with that as an artist, but with your explanation, it gives to go forward. Did you hear me?
I did, Jeremy. I heard most of it. You froze just at the last second. With my explanation, something. It's okay. But thank you, Jeremy. Jeremy, my guess is Jeremy Eagle is a brilliant artist, everybody, and he understands ambiguity quite well, if you ask me. But anyway, thank you for your kind words, Jeremy. I really appreciate it. Did I just see? Oh, I'm seeing people go by on the little film strip on top who I haven't seen in years. Anyway, we probably have time for like one more question, I think. 7:28. I do respect everybody's time. If there's anything else.
Lee, it's Jan.
Hey, Jan.
I just can't help being a little cautious about what you're talking about when you talk about the study with the Art 21. And the reason that I say that is that the work that you're doing is so not gallery focused in terms of the kinds of work, and many or most of the artists who are being featured in Art 21 have a particular focus of their work that from the get-go may be a bit narrow for the breadth that you're talking about in terms of trying to understand this motivation and basis for making culture. And I'm not casting aspersions like one is good and one is bad. I'm just thinking about motivation, inspiration, and the qualities, the intuition that go into the creative process. And I
Yeah,
don't know
I
if you
think
want to
that's-
respond to that.
I do, because Jan, that's brilliant. See, this is why, other than painting, I never work alone. You're absolutely right. I mean, if that's all we hear from is successful blue chip artists, we're going to get a very distorted curve. So you are going to have to work with me on this study and help me understand what you're thinking.
It would be a joy. I'd love it. It'd be great fun.
Okay.
So
Fantastic.
Lee, real quick, is there a way we can keep in touch with you? By
Oh,
email?
absolutely. Absolutely. My email is boot@umbc.edu. Very easy to remember. I flashed that on the screen too quickly at the end of my talk. You can just Google Lee Boot, and fortunately the internet has finally figured out I'm here. And you can find me in my lab.
And we can also send your information out via email to everybody who registered to come tonight.
Great.
So, and we'll also be sending out the link to the recording. And I think with that, I will say thank you very much to our interpreters, and thank you, Lee. Thank you to Heather and Kim and Maya, who've been running the show in the background for us here at Peel. And we hope to see you on the 11th, if not before. The Peel is open Thursdays and Fridays from 3 until 7 p.m. and Saturday and Sunday from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. So do come by and see the show.
Nancy,
Thank you,
thank you.
everyone.
And thank you to Peel Museum for showing Lee's work. It's very important.
It's been an honor,
Go
really.
Peel. Thank you, everybody.